All right, one-year wonders. I can already tell they're going to put the 2017 Jaguars here, but who else do they got?
These teams peaked once, then disappeared. Throughout NFL history, we've seen teams come out of nowhere to take the league by storm. They look unstoppable, yet somehow they wilt into obscurity just as fast as they blossomed. In today's video, we will look at all the infamous one-year wonder teams of the past 30 years or so, going over their spectacular seasons out of nowhere and their sudden falls from grace. Now, keep in mind, to qualify for this video, a team needs to have been bad for years prior to that great singular season, then immediately go back to being terrible. So a team like the 2016 Falcons wouldn't count because they made the playoffs the year following their Super Bowl loss.
Okay, that's I appreciate the clarity. There is a difference from a team who went to the Super Bowl one year and lost to then like going to the playoffs next year but not getting back to the Super Bowl. Like that's not the same because you still were a winning record, you still made the playoffs. Like that's different. But having a massive year and then just completely disappearing for the next couple, that quantifies a one-year wonder.
Then they started sucking again. Anyways, with that out of the way, let's begin. First up, the 1998 Falcons.
Ooh, the Chris Chandler Falcons.
In the 90s, the Atlanta Falcons were an afterthought. They had only made the playoffs 3 times from 81 to 97, and they didn't make it very far in those postseason runs.
No.
The most notable thing in that 17-year stretch was the Deion Sanders years, which were loud and thrilling, but never amounted to much as far as team success goes. In 97, the team was on their 6th head coach since 1982, and saw a promising step in the right direction when the team won 7 games. Now, in the grand scheme of the NFL, they were still a middle-of-the-pack forgotten franchise.
Big time.
Then, when the 1998 season kicked off, everything changed.
Chandler will go to the air. Wide open. Terrence Mathis. Mathis has his second touchdown today.
Journeyman quarterback Chris Chandler put in a Pro Bowl-level season, and Jamal Anderson rushed for over 1,800 yards.
Jamal Anderson was really the reason why the Atlanta Falcons were able to even survive that long. I mean, like it was a good example of a decent offense that's well balanced that was completely transformed because of one performance, one player. You want a good example, and I know I'm going to get hated for this by the Eagles fans, but it needs to be brought up. Barkley had a monster year. No one could slow him down. And because of that, it took a lot of pressure off of A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert and Jalen Hurts. They were fine otherwise. So it made everything else easier because teams were more focused on stopping Saquon than stopping the passing game, which left opportunities open for them to exploit that. So it's the similar situation here with Atlanta. They had a very good running game with Jamal Anderson, and it opened up doors for Chandler to perform with the rest of the offense. Again, Chandler, I don't think he was having a very good career up to that point. He had this one monster year, and then after that, he kind of faded back into some kind of obscurity. But this season of the Falcons, fans will tell you, it was magical. They really thought they were going to win the whole thing.
The Falcons went on to have an epic run to a 14-2 record. This season was the origin of the team being dubbed the Dirty Birds, which resulted from Jamal Anderson popularizing this dance move, as well as tight end O.J. Santiago referring to the team as such after their win versus the Patriots. Somehow the Dirty Birds didn't lock down the number 1 seed that season, despite winning 14 games.
Because of the Vikings.
But it didn't matter in the end. They first bested the Niners in the divisional round, then they went to Minnesota and stunned the 15-1 Vikings in an overtime thriller to punch their ticket to the Super Bowl.
Poor Minnesota. They've had so many years where they should have won, should have gone farther. They just didn't. Poor Vikings, man.
This Cinderella story struck midnight against the Denver Broncos as the
Broncos were a machine.
34-19, ending their incredible season. Fans were still thrilled about the future of this team headed into 1999, but sadly, they would completely fall apart. Jamal Anderson would suffer a season-ending injury early in 1999.
Yep.
Chris Chandler looked like a shell of himself.
Correct.
And the 99 Falcons finished 5-11. Despite getting a healthy Jamal Anderson back in 2000, he was nowhere near as effective as he was 2 years prior. Things went even worse for the team, as they won just 4 games. They had mysteriously gone from a top 5 offense and defense to both units looking abysmal. It wasn't until the franchise reset with Michael Vick where we would see this team return to the postseason. which took place 4 seasons after that Super Bowl run.
Beasley in motion, and Garcia's pass is bobbled by Owens. Mike Brown into the end zone.
After the memories of the Ditka years faded, reality set in for the Chicago Bears. They were not a good football team. From 1991 to 2000, they made the postseason once and had a record of 5-11 or worse 4 times. They were bad on both sides of the ball. However, the one redeeming move that they had made was drafting Brian Urlacher with their first-round pick in 2000. He went on to win Defensive Rookie of the Year that season. Urlacher would become the key piece in an amazing 2001 season that nobody expected. The Bears would deploy one of the most brutally tough defenses in recent memory, resembling the success of the Buddy Ryan years. Early into that season, safety Mike Brown had a game-winning pick 6 in overtime, not just once, but twice, 2 weeks in a row. In the end, the defense produced 5 Pro Bowlers, led by MVP candidate Brian Urlacher. The defense finished first in points allowed.
Just remember that for a second. Urlacher was a finalist for the MVP as a defensive player. If that doesn't tell you how much of a machine this dude was early in his career, oh man, I don't know what to tell you.
Giving up just 12.7 points per game. And the offense improved tremendously as well, led by Anthony Thomas, their Offensive Rookie of the Year running back. This 13-3 regular season marked the most wins by this team in 15 years. They had gone from the 20th best defense to the top defense in the league in one season. Unfortunately, they immediately got beat by the Eagles in the divisional round. Despite so much excitement and apparent young talent this team had, they would completely fall apart in 2002, going 4-12. Urlacher was still a beast, but the rest of the team was pretty atrocious. They had started 3 different quarterbacks. It was a nightmare. Then another mediocre season the following year would see their head coach get fired. It was back to the drawing board.
And then enter Lovie
Smith. It took the Bears
Smith.
4 years to return to the postseason after that spectacular 2001 campaign. Looking at their ridiculous 3-year difference in point differential, they were outscored by opponents by 139 points in 2000. Then they outscored opponents by 135 points in 2001.
It's a crazy
Then they
flip.
went back in the negatives, getting outscored in 2002. The end of the Dick Duron years were brutal, but the Bears would make a great decision hiring their next head coach, bringing in Lovie Smith. He would eventually lead them to a Super Bowl appearance. The Bears switching to Lovie Smith is kind of like making the switch to Mint Mobile, today's video sponsor.
You ain't getting this.
There's probably not a team who was as terrible as the Browns were from 2003 to 2019. It's flat out embarrassing for the city of Cleveland. In those 17 seasons, they had a winning record 1 time, and they outscored their opponents 1 time.
Yes.
That was in 2007, when shockingly, the Browns looked like a competent football team. It was apparent early in that season that things were going to be unusual. In week 2, the Browns beat the Bengals in a 51-45 shootout. There would not be a higher scoring NFL game for 7 years. Then a few weeks later, Browns kicker Phil Dawson had one of the most bizarre kicks you'll ever see. It hit the upright, then the crossbar, then landed on the field side, leading the officials to saying no good. But then the play got reviewed, and it was determined that the ball had actually crossed the conversion zone before bouncing out, making it a successful field goal. This sent the game to overtime,
I didn't remember
and
this.
the Browns eventually won. These were just 2 of the wacky events that led the Browns to finishing 10-6.
Also, shout out Phil Dawson. He was a monster kicker when he played. He was very good.
Derek Anderson, their quarterback, was a Pro Bowler for the first and only time of his career.
Yep.
Jamal Lewis, instead of running over the Browns, ran guys over for the Browns. It was an amazing season.
Cool, those Bills unis. I don't miss those. I do miss the helmets. The helmets were nice, but I do not miss those uniforms.
And still, even when things went well, they didn't make the playoffs. This is the only non-playoff team I consider for this video, and there's a good reason why. Let me read the Browns' records during this time, starting with 2003. 5-11,
4-12, 6-10, 4-12, 10-6, 4-12.
In other words, it's real fun being a Browns fan.
Pennington is not under center. Again, Ronnie Brown looking to throw it. Brown, touchdown!
That's the
The
Dolphins.
2000 Dolphins
Pennington.
finished the regular season with an abysmal 1-15 record. They had no idea what direction to go in. They fired first-year head coach Cam Cameron after the season, and before him, they had fired 3 different head coaches since 2004, Hoping to help restabilize the team, the Dolphins hired Tony Sparano in 2008. Sparano had never been an NFL coordinator, serving previously as the Cowboys' O-line coach and assistant head coach. Things didn't look great at first when the team began the season 0-2, but then the Dolphins made a splash. On the road versus New England, the Dolphins became the story of the day, with running back Ronnie Brown producing 5 touchdowns. This had come from a mix of running and passing. With the Wildcat formation, where a non-quarterback takes the direct snap, the Dolphins completely overwhelmed the mighty Patriots that day. And for the rest of the season, this Wildcat phenomenon stayed at the forefront of the NFL conversation.
And it's a shame because the Wildcat was so unique for its time. It was just impossible to guard. It took teams forever to figure out how to fix this. You're preparing for a run and all your guys are converging down to the running back who's got it. But then now you have to worry about if he throws it, you have to be ready to defend. And also he's taking it out of shotgunning. It kind of cuts down the time that the defender has to close down the gaps and get there to get to the guy. So they started adjusting by loading up the box more. They started adding more guys to the line, a stronger attack. And by doing that, they kind of took this out of the equation altogether. And nowadays, you just won't even see it. You won't even see this play run. So a couple of things to really keep in mind there when we talk about the Dolphins. That Wildcat was really good for that season, but right afterwards, nobody was fooled by it anymore. They figured it out in 1 year.
Throughout the first 11 games that the Dolphins used the Wildcat, they accounted for 7 yards per play, producing 8 touchdowns on 90 snaps in that formation. It was unstoppable as the Dolphins led the biggest single season turnaround in NFL history, going on to win 11 games, and they won the division for the first time in 8 years. Their quarterback Chad Pennington was runner-up for MVP, which was pretty crazy considering he didn't even make a Pro Bowl that season or in his first 8 seasons. Unfortunately, the Wildcat was ineffective in the playoffs as the Ravens pummeled the Dolphins in the wild card. As fun as the season was for Miami, it became painfully obvious how gimmicky the Wildcat was in the coming years. Its effectiveness dramatically decreased after defenses adjusted, and they failed to make the playoffs again during the Sparano years. From 2002 to 2015, 14 seasons, the Dolphins made the playoffs once. Also, it is worth mentioning that this was the year that Brady got injured in Week 1, which did open the door for Miami to win the division. After Joe Gibbs retired, Washington entered a rough 4-year stretch. They went 8-8 in 2008, then failed to win more than 6 games in 2009, 10, and 11. Even though they had hired the legendary Mike Shanahan, they could not figure out the quarterback position. They had tried Jason Campbell, Donovan McNabb, Rex Grossman, all to no avail. This was a concern that they addressed in the 2012 NFL Draft by selecting Baylor dual-threat quarterback RG3. This turned out to be a big-time decision because the results changed overnight. Despite a 3-6 start, RG3 went on to become one of the best quarterbacks in football as a rookie, leading the league in both passing yards per attempt, while also having the highest rush yards per attempt. These types of numbers were unheard of. RG3 was named Rookie of the Year, and Washington made their first playoff appearance in 6 seasons. Based on how these final 7 games went, it seemed like Washington was a serious Super Bowl contender, and in the wildcard, they went up 14-0 against Seattle. But then RG3 tore his ACL, and Seattle came back and won that game. It was truly a heartbreaking way for this amazing season to end. And once RG3 recovered, it was never the same. 2013 was a complete disaster. RG3 was nowhere near as effective as he tried to transition more into being a pocket passer. The team went from the #1 rush attack in the NFL to just average, and RG3's injuries began to mount up. He missed 3 games in 2013, then he missed more than half the season in 2014. In those 2 years, the team went 3-13, fired Mike Shanahan, then went 4-12. Under new head coach Jay Gruden, the team would completely pivot away from RG3 by 2015 and rolled with Kirk Cousins, which helped them make the playoffs once again. But for the RG3 era, it all came down to one magical season, then injury-riddled disappointment.
It's hard to kind of chop it up that way because, the injuries definitely do tell a lot of the story. But what I do want to add to this is you can't just blame it on RG3's injuries. You heard what he said after the rookie year, what happened. He said he wasn't as effective because Shanahan had the idea to move him into a traditional pocket passer, make him more of a pocket passing QB, when that was never his desired skill set. It was never built for that. You know, RG3 made his career out of being mobile, being able to run around and do things. Now, listen, it's one thing if RG3 had physical limitations that kind of kept him from doing that, and it was he who said that that's not good for me, I can't do that. That's one thing. But I don't believe that RG3 would do that. I understand if you're transitioning him back in and you start by restricting him in his mobility outside the pocket, but they should have let him run more. I'm not going to lie. He probably would have been better off by being allowed to run. It honestly really hurt his chances of being successful in the league. I think Shanahan handicapped him. Jay Gruden didn't believe in him from the get-go, and Jay Gruden screwed him out of a job. Second year, you went from mobile QB to pocket passer now. That's not normal. You don't just do that. So take of that what you will, but I 100% blame this on Shanahan and Gruden for ruining him.
What's worrisome for this franchise is we're seeing a similar trajectory with their current team. With Jaden Daniels, they made that incredible run in 2014 to the NFC title game. Now, in 2025, Daniels has been banged up, and things have been a total disaster. Hopefully, Daniels doesn't suffer the same fate as RG3.
We've made a lot of medical advancements since then. Teams have better understandings of all the injuries, so do the medical staffs. You can come back. You definitely can.
Change the situation here.
I knew they were going to put this team on the list. I knew they had to. They had to put them here.
Like the Browns, what we witnessed from the Raiders most of the 2000s and 2010s was an utter embarrassment.
Garbage.
In an 18-year stretch from 2003 to 2020, this team ended their seasons with 5 wins or less 11 times, and they had just 1 playoff appearance. They also had 9 head coaches in that span. Brutal. It really makes their 2016 team look like a complete anomaly. Entering the 2016 season, the Raiders were coming off their best season in 4 years.
The 2016
wasn't
Raiders.
saying much.
That
They
was
had
magical.
won 7 games after being abysmal the previous 3 years. But finally, they had found some continuity with their young core of players, which included Derek Carr, Amari Cooper, and Khalil Mack. Building upon that 2015 success, the 2016 squad took things to another level.
That core 3 he just named just took me to a place I didn't think I would go back to. Taking me back to high school and seeing the Raiders play good was like literally a fever dream. And then they never really got back to this.
Derek Carr in his 3rd season had developed into one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL. He began the season defeating the Saints in a shootout, and in that game made this iconic dive for a first down. After starting the regular season 5-2, Carr threw for over 500 yards and 4 touchdowns
He
to
committed.
defeat the Bucks in overtime. Meanwhile, Khalil Mack was putting up a Defensive Player of the Year type of season. Through 14 games,
He's
the
a Hall of
Raiders were
Famer.
11-3. Carr was an MVP candidate, and this team had a legit chance of making a Super Bowl run. I even made a video way back when about how good Derek Carr was that season. But unfortunately, this season would come to a crashing halt the following week. Carr would suffer a fractured fibula in week 16 that would end his season. This team still won that game and possessed a 12-3 record, but without Carr, they looked lifeless on offense after the injury. In week 17, they got curb stomped by the Broncos. Then in the wild card, backup Connor Cook looked completely overwhelmed in a loss versus the Texans.
If it wasn't for the Carr injury, I think that team probably would have been a Super Bowl team. They probably would have made it. But it just goes to show you how important Derek Carr was to this team, and it makes it so much more devastating the Raiders couldn't win anything with Carr. Because there came a point where Carr became the issue, but that was very late in his career in Vegas. So, I mean, I wish he would have really won something with Oakland. They had a lot of potential there, and that probably was the best year. There was not going to be another chance for him, and knowing how unstable the Raiders franchise has been for ever since the Jamarcus Russell pick, it has been kind of an amazing sight to see, but also very embarrassing.
Just like that,
This year's no
the
different.
magic was gone. Despite the same nucleus of young talent and even adding players like Marshawn Lynch, the Raiders fell completely flat the following season, going 6-10. Carr put up pedestrian numbers, and Jack Del Rio was fired after the season. With the hiring of John Gruden, this team completely blew up the roster, primarily with the trade that sent Khalil Mack to Chicago. This created an irreplaceable hole in the defense, and in 2018, the Raiders finished dead last in points allowed, as the team won just 4 measly games. It was clear they were in rebuild mode after trading both Mack and Amari Cooper. When you look at the 4 years before and after that 2016 season, the Raiders failed to get even close to the success that they had experienced during that epic one-year run.
Yep.
Hold on. He got away from Jackson.
This is definitely the Jaguars now. Oh, I've been waiting on this.
Continuing with the theme of bad organizations that randomly pop off, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars. Their stretch of horrifically bad football from 2011 to 2016 is worthy of a video on its own. They failed to win more than 5 games in a season during that span. It was death, taxes, and Jacksonville picking in the top 5. One thing was clear. Despite not winning games, the Jags were acquiring some serious talent with their draft capital.
They were.
And in 2017, after hitting on some free agency moves and trades, they had become a juggernaut. Nicknamed Saxonville, this team completely overwhelmed others week in and week out with their unbelievable defense. They forced turnovers at an elite rate, and in the end, they had produced an insane 6 Pro Bowlers on the defensive side.
We're talking like Tashawn Gibson, Miles Jack, AJ Boye, Jalen Ramsey. I think I said Calais Campbell. I don't know if I said it, but I'm going to add him in. Yannick Ngakoue. There were so many good players. I think Paul Posluszny was still on the team. I mean, all the way around, this Jaguar team was ridiculously powerful.
The offense was rather average, with a decent run game led by rookie Leonard Fournette. But at least they weren't awful, and that's what helped them win 10 games. They had produced 7 defensive touchdowns that season, 5 of which were scoops and scores. Only one team ever had produced more fumble return touchdowns in a single season. Pretty wild considering that this was one of the worst defenses in the league a year prior. In the postseason, this defense continued to dominate. They gave up just 3 points to Buffalo in a wildcard victory.
All right, pause. First off, before you get into that, remind me who was the quarterback again? That's right. Nathan Peterman had to step in and play. So let's kind of put an asterisk on that one.
In the following game, Jacksonville went to Pittsburgh and jumped out to a 28-7 lead after a Telvin Smith fumble return touchdown. They would hang on to defeat the Steelers that day, which meant that the Jags had reached the AFC title game. Despite a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter, the Jags could not hang on and lost a heartbreaker. There were questionable calls made that Jags fans will still talk about to this day. But
there were a lot of bad ones.
The hangover following that loss was brutal. The defense was still good in 2018, but did take a slight step back, and the offense was atrocious. The magic of Saxonville had vanished, and they won just 5 games. Reality truly set in the following season, when the defense completely fell apart, and they decided to blow things up after firing Doug Marrone and trading away key players like Jalen Ramsey. 3 years following that run to the AFC Championship, and Jacksonville had hit rock bottom, winning just 1 game. Here's a crazy fact. From 2011 to 2021, the Jags went 6-10 or worse in all but one of those seasons. And that one season, they nearly made the Super Bowl. For the second time in this video, the Chicago Bears make an appearance. After the Jay Cutler era crashed and burned, the Bears were on the search for another quarterback. They were coming off a season where they had gone 3-13, and they had trotted out a combination of Jay Cutler, Brian Hoyer, and Matt Barkley. This had marked 6 seasons in a row that the Bears failed to make the playoffs. To answer the question about who was going to take over at quarterback, the team decided to draft Mitch Trubisky, number 2 overall, in 2017. But after a 5-11 season where Trubisky looked over his skis, the Bears fired head coach John Fox.
Well, that was also partially because it wasn't just him. He got thrown into the fire because they spent so much money on Mike Glennon that they kind of made it seem like Trubisky wasn't prepared. He was not prepared to start. He had to start. So there's also that factor too. Can't forget that.
And brought in Matt Nagy to try and help their young quarterback. Spoiler alert, things completely changed in 2018. The difference offensively was night and day. In week 4, the Bears put up 48 points in a crushing victory where Trubisky threw 6 touchdowns. In week 10, Trubisky threw for over 350 yards while scoring a total of 4 touchdowns. This offense was fun, innovative, flashy, and was doing things no Bears fan was used to seeing, at least from their team. But to be honest, the reason this team excelled was because of their defense. The acquisition of Khalil Mack in the offseason took a good unit and made them into the best in the NFL. In 2018, the Bears offense was top 10 in scoring, and the defense was number 1, with
Mack literally changed the
finishing as the
trajectory of this
runner-up
team.
for Defensive Player of the Year. The Bears finished the regular season 12-4. They had not won at least 12 games in a season since their run to the Super Bowl back in 2006. Going into the playoffs, having won 9 of their last 10, a Super Bowl run was very tangible. But trailing by 1 in the final moments of their wildcard game, Cody Parkey had a chance to send the Bears to the divisional round. And he double doinked it.
The double doink.
Just like that, the Bears fell back into
that was going to be
obscurity.
the clip.
The following season, they would miss the playoffs, and Trubisky took a step backwards. Despite finishing 8-8 in 2020, the Bears somehow managed to make the playoffs, but quickly got stomped out by the Saints. By that point, it was clear the team needed a new direction, and they drafted Justin Fields to replace Trubisky.
And that
The
was
Bears
not
would
the
fail to
right
win More
answer.
than 7 games in a season in the
That
4
wasn't the
years
right answer.
that followed. Some Bears fans may point to the 2010 team being a bigger one-year wonder because they made it to the conference championship game that year, and then they didn't make the playoffs for 7 seasons afterwards.
Yeah, but they
And
were
I
10
can
and
understand
6
where
and
they're
8 and
coming
8.
from, but I'd
Twice.
argue that the 2012 team was actually better, considering they had a higher point differential than 2010, with that Cutler-Brandon Marshall connection on another level in 2012. Regardless, the Bears have done this multiple times. Moments where they shined and then drifted away. Well, hopefully with the way 2025 is going, Bears fans can enjoy long success with Caleb Williams.
Statistically, I wouldn't put all my eggs in that basket, but based off what you're seeing on the field, there's a reason to be excited. You look at the numbers, you kind of get terrified, and you really start to wonder, should we have spent the first overall pick on him? It's like it's a tale of two different stories depending on how you look at it. The film or literally the numbers. Great video as always from KTO. They always cook up some great videos. Can you name a team that's a bigger one-year wonder than the ones mentioned in this video? Because honestly to me, I think 2017 takes the cake. Maybe I can make a case for that one Browns team. They made it to the playoffs out of nowhere. They won a playoff game against Pittsburgh and nearly beat Kansas City with Baker. And then they haven't been the same team since then. I also think that Atlanta team, the Chris Chandler team, that definitely has to be up there as well. Both squads were like, oh, they were not good. What would you say is the biggest one-year wonder? At least in your lifetime. Let me know in the comments.